very fortunate to be working with something which really is quite a magical thing. It's amazing how it transforms itself. Glass was the only material I've ever worked with which you can't touch while you're working it. Everything else, stone, wood, you're constantly touching, it's very tactile. But with the glass you're touching through other materials, and that might be the newspaper pad that I'm using, the blocks, the marver, jacks, the tweezers, whatever it might be, you're just a little bit away from it. And that's why I'm constantly looking for different things that I can put in my hand to get close to the work. Waking up in the morning, coming into a glassworks, and if we think about it, it's a hot, sweaty job. It's it's not the most pleasant of environments sometimes to work in, but I absolutely adore it. I mean, you're manipulating a material which is constantly changing. It's malleable. You can add to it, cut into it. It's fantastic, and I'm so fortunate to be in a position where I can do that. I haven't had a traditional glass blowing kind of apprenticeship, so to speak. Ever since I was very young, I always enjoyed doing art, and I went up to Leicester to do a degree in sculpture. Did teaching for 6 years, both in the UK and in New Zealand. And while I was in New Zealand, I was still doing figurative sculpture. And then I turned some of these sculptures into glass by doing lost wax kiln casting. I came back to the UK and thought I'd carry on doing that, make my sculptures in glass. And I hired a little room next to my white glass, and I just watched the glass blowers, and I thought I'd like to work with the molten glass. Arreton Barns at that time wanted the glassworks, and I basically set it all up. So I built my glassworks and sat at the bench, got a bit of glass out, and tried to make a bird. That was the first thing I tried to do. I'm always drawn to things that are much more sculptural than just things like a traditional vase. However, occasionally I do like to try and do things like that as well. So it's a whole range of different things I do. And what I like to do is when people come into the glassworks, every visit they have, if they come once a year, they'll see something new. They'll see a different piece, something that will surprise them. Not, in terms of colour, but especially in terms of form and the sculptural pieces. So it's not always the same things they're looking at. And I'll always have the popular range, like the little robins. When you run a business, you have to have a whole range of different things, from the small bread and butter lines all the way up to the quite big sculptural pieces. To actually make a glass piece, inside the furnace, the glass is always hot inside there, so the furnace is always on, we don't turn it off. We take a length of iron rod, and then we roll the end of it into the glass, take it out, and then that rod we can shape it, then put more glass on top, go to the bench, pull that around a bit, back into the furnace, put more glass on top of that, and you can layer it up, build it up. And things like the figurative vases, we'll have multiple figures, so you have 13, 20 figures all added together. Once you've actually made a piece, finally, you need to make sure that the whole piece is the same temperature. So you can throw things together quite quickly, but then you need to make sure it's all stabilised, but essentially the glass thinks it's one piece of glass. It hasn't got one hot bit and one cold bit. You have to put it into another oven, which is held at about 500 degrees, so half the temperature of the furnace. The furnace is about 1070, and that's so that throughout the piece, from deep inside to the surface, it's all the same temperature. And then during the night, I'll cool the oven down. If you think about it, it's 50 times colder in my studio than it is in the furnace. We're going from 1000 degrees to room temperature. And one great analogy I like to use is it's a bit like being in a really hot bath and going into ice cold water. It's a bit of a shock. So for the glass, it's too much stress, and what we'd like to do is put it in an oven, a bit like tepid water, and cool it down very, very gently, and it takes all the stress out, and that way the glass is happy. Thinking about making a piece of work, I've got loads and loads of ideas about what I want to do, and sometimes the limitations of your skills stop you from realising those ideas. And sometimes I've woken up in the middle of the night and thought, oh right, yes, I've sussed it out now, I could do this, or if I cut it like that, or let it swing down and sweep it up. And you slowly, over months and years, realise those ideas that have been mulling about in your head over a long period of time. We generally do a lot of glass sculpting and some glass blowing, where recently we're doing blown figure vases, where we're actually blowing bubbles into a sculpture of figures which are all embracing each other, supporting each other, and creating these quite unusual blown vessels. Worked very hard to be where I am now, and my family, certainly in the early days, made a lot of sacrifices, and we did. The first few years were not easy. I employed quite a few of my friends. Yeah, I think they're very proud of what they're doing. My wife's just started working with me now, which is great, because she's starting to actually get more involved in the business. Now that the children are getting, I've got 4 children, and now they're getting a little bit older. I've got Jake at university, and they're starting to sort of. It's really good. It's a good thing. In terms of developing my work and pushing that further, I've started now to have exhibitions of my work in London, and soon go to France, which is very exciting. I've got some work now in galleries on the mainland as well. I'd say the figurative blown vases are my favourite at the moment, because they're quite a struggle to get right. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong when you're making them. And you're relying on lots of other people to make sure they're not getting it wrong as well. So for it all to come together at the end, and it's all worked, it's great. I love living on the Isle of Wight. It's a fantastic place to live. Arreton Barns is a great place to make glass. Glass really is quite a magical thing. It transforms itself. I absolutely adore it. I've been struggling to make the figurative vase for a very long time. Now I've made it, I look at it and I'm so pleased with it. It's so satisfying. It's a great feeling of achievement.